Hello and welcome to Witchy Wizardy Wednesday. It is another live community, inspirational community collaboration. We have wonderful guests today. If I can find my my drop down. Today we have two amazing guests. As always, we have wonderful guests on this show.
Welcome.
Oh yeah, you have to mute it when you do the watch party. Today we have the wonderful Jennifer Russell. I'll introduce her in a minute. After her, at 10 a.m. we have Nate Green, aka Nature Dreamweaver, who will be talking to us about his improvisational comedy, his enchanting healing art, the way he uses nature to create a womb of consciousness. So I'll bring Jennifer on and then I'll introduce her. Here we go, and our seamless transitions. Jennifer Russell, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let me introduce you. What I've got for you, Jennifer. We've had wonderful experiences connecting in different locations, but I would say that Jennifer is an inspiring entrepreneur. We're going to be talking about evolving how we love and lead. You've worked as a transformational master coach, specializing in removing limiting beliefs and internal conflict. You're a community leader and you're inspired by the personal empowerment of others. I kind of spliced that in at the end because I thought it was my experience of you was exactly that. How are you?
Oh, doing really well this morning. Excited because every conversation I've had with you has been incredibly energizing, enlivening, and wise. So I can't wait for us to dive in.
Wow. Well, no pressure then. I'll just put my hood up. I've got my wizardy cloak on today.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So. Oh, okay. Well, wonderful. Tell us about some of the stuff you're doing at the moment. What's really alive for you? What you're passionate about at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what a great question. I love to be at the intersection of what creates our evolution. You know, if I get to dance at your evolutionary edge and we get to dance on mine, then I'm going to be really living my purpose. And I see us as humans sort of toggling back and forth between two areas of our lives, two parts of the human experience. And I like to dance in both of these areas. And one is our agency, which is really our ability to feel empowered and to lead and serve and inspire, right? So this is where we find our own empowerment and realize how potent we really are in creating our reality. So that's evolving how we lead. But then we have the other half of the human experience is not just an internal self one, but an external other one, which is communion, which is how do we relate and really essentially love other beings? And can we evolve just the very ideas of how we love? Because we've been sort of sold a lot of bill of goods on what that looks like through our media and through just our culture. So I'm one of those people that really like to dance on those edges and evolve both how we lead and how we love, evolve our sovereignty and our unity, evolve our agency and our communion, right? It's both sides of the polarity.
Yeah, I love that. There've been the way society is at the moment, it seems to be that they've taken these two things and they've separated them, and they've kind of said, look, if you want to be empowered, you have to kind of go out on your own and you have to kind of do your own stuff and don't share, because there's limited supply and limited things and fear. What would you say with relation to that in terms of how they're connected, these two aspects of self-empowerment and unity empowerment?
Yes, I love this. Well, first I just want to comment because you said something really beautiful. It's insightful and a little bit sad perhaps about our society is that we live in rivalrous dynamics, right? Meaning we live in a society where we sort of take for granted this idea that it's about competition, right? And so there are winners and there are losers. And if there was one belief that I think is undermining us globally, It's this idea that it's okay if some of us win while others of us lose.
Right.
And whether those others are competitive organizations, or their societies, countries, political parties, genders, races, or even species, right? We create a very rivalrous win-lose dynamic. So our leadership, when it's focused only on our agency, only on ourselves, sets us up to have this rivalrous competitive dynamic. And that is ultimately self-exterminating, right? Because you get fewer and fewer winners, more and more losers, until the environment's losing, races are losing, countries are losing, people are losing, and therefore you get what we have today. So what balances that? You're asking the question, like, why are these feel like very different things, right? Most people, when they see what I do, they're like, which is it? Do you do leadership and business, or do you love? And for me, the marriage of the two is the sweet spot. If you'll find out more, I imagine, as we talk, that if I'm about anything, it's like the integration of these polarities. And I love to be in conversations with these paradoxes of polarity, that people find themselves in opposition. So they're at internal war with themselves.
Right.
And so on the other side, so just talking about love for a minute, so that's our state of the art on leadership, which is a rivalrous dynamic of winners and losers. It's opposition, and it incentivizes us to compete.
Right.
What would be an evolved way to lead, serve, and inspire that might bust that myth, might go beyond it, transcend it, include what's good about that, but also look beyond that. And so what can we look at there? And there's a ton we can talk about today, Markabadi, about that. Right. But then, as we figure that out, how do we then not just look narcissistically at ourselves, but how do we look outward at other, at communion, at unity with other? Like, how do we relate in ways that are evolved and healthy, so that it's not just about how do I get what I want and get ahead and achieve and have more than everyone else, but it's also about how do I relate to others, because there's a whole system we're inside of, and how do I relate in a way to end the war, right? I often say that we cannot live in a world without war until we heal the war between the sexes, the masculine and feminine. And I don't just mean men with women. I mean the masculine and feminine inside ourselves, because the war starts internally, and then we replicate it externally. We replicate it in our love lives. We replicate it in our political parties, our economic systems. We replicate it in the narrative warfare that we participate in. We replicate it culturally. So I'm all about, if I'm about something, passionate. You said, what am I passionate about?
Yes.
I want to end the war. I want to heal the divide in all of us.
It's an interesting one, because ending the war is, it's like, even those metaphors, they are, one person is winning and the other person's losing. But this war we're talking about, this internal, why? I mean, what is actually going on there? Because there is this, and what comes up in these conversations, what I love so much about these conversations that are going on now, I mean, I've done 60, 70 interviews now, and there's themes, there's patterns, and it might just be me, the eye, looking upon the things as I see them, but this duality, this dance between the Ida, the Pingala, the yin, the yang, the masculine, the feminine, the Carduceus spiraling DNA strands of consciousness seem to keep coming up and repeating. And then on top of that, the other thing that keeps coming up is this triad that comes out of the duality that seems to be emerging when we somehow combine these paradoxes together. There seems to be a third entity that arises. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. And that, to me, dancing with that third entity is to me the transcendent, is the next kind of evolution of humanity, if you will, as we recognize something beyond the oppositional forms of duality. It's not to deny duality. We actually live in a dual universe. We've actually come here on purpose to experience relationship from unity consciousness, if you will. Like if we imagine that there's a form of being which is whole and united with all, we purposefully dived into this incarnation to feel ourselves in a relational context, feeling that separation so that we could know ourselves, so that all that is could know itself. So there is a duality here that is part of this reality. But the way that we relate to that duality, that is something that's up to us individually, and you can tell where we are developmentally in our evolution by how do we relate to that duality. So it's neither only be dual and oppositional or only be whole. It's how do we dance in duality, holding both the whole and the dual, which creates this third entity. And when you pop dimensionally out of opposition, where it's either or, and you go into this sort of both and, you realize each is only telling half the story of our enlightenment, half the story of what it means to be human. We are, if you will, like reaching as an evolution up towards our unity and reaching down from our unity, involution, down into what is it like to be human. So there's involution and evolution happening in a human body. That is the most exciting show on earth. So let's not become the non-dual conference and only pretend that this is only unity, nor do we forget our unity and realize that we're only separate beings, but let's dance in this third place that holds the two. So that, to me, and it's not just duality, unity and sovereignty. It's like there are polarities everywhere: masculine, feminine, structure, flow, freedom, devotion, truth, harmony, like eros, philos. There are so many of these, and they all form this third entity when you pop.
Okay, and so the element is it's a combination. One of the words that Z introduced me to was confluence.
Yes, I love this word too.
It's a wonderful word. And so the notion is like rivers confluent, confluescent. Oh shit, I know. They confluent together. Whatever. When two rivers come together and mix.
I have a new word for you. Tell Z, because this is another gorgeous one. They tessellate.
Ooh, tessellate. So, tessellate sounds like it's electric.
Yes, there's a tessellation where they each kind of intermingle and merge with each other, where they each retain their wholeness, they each retain their qualities, and yet they merge into something like a synergy, something greater than they would have been apart. But in that tessellation, you get the intelligence of both. There is a massive intelligence in duality, and there is a massive intelligence in our wholeness. And so I'm all about, like, how do we dance in our evolutionary edge, understanding both, and have our human experience evolve and involve, go in and go out at the same time.
And you said that in that tessellation, people, the things retain their independent whole.
Yes, I like to think of, I don't know if you're familiar with spiral dynamics.
Sure.
But it's another one of my favorite evolutionary models. And Claire Graves originally developed it, and later Don Beck, and then later Ken Wilber have all popularized it. But there's this concept of self-organizing systems.
Yes. And
just like the kind of the short definition of what is a self-organizing system is something like you are in deep relationship to being a part of a whole. You're part of a larger system, and in being part of that whole system, not trying to kind of pull yourself out of it like we do. Even our homes are about like a barrier between us and nature, right? We create a lot of walls between us and the systems we're part of. But this is a recognition of that, of the whole, while it's self-organizing, meaning like there is a right role, a unique self, a place that is your unique position within the whole that is yours to do. And you get to sovereignly operate within a self-organizing system where everyone is doing that. Self-organizing means if everyone, much like the cells of your body, every cell isn't trying to be a skin cell or a liver cell or a kidney cell. They all are part of a larger body, but yet they have their own role within that body, that the body would be diseased if they didn't have their role. And they're self-organizing, self-determining within their role to carry out what their function is. And yet they are part of this larger harmonious thing. And so if we would act a little bit more like that on this planet, ecologically, even universally, galactically, if we spiral way out, then we would all actually be incredibly satisfied, because we would only be doing that which we were dharmically meant to be doing. And we would be not cutting our nose to spite our face. We would be literally, instead of self-terminating, because right now our systems are, we're on an existential crisis. We're in an existential crisis. We would be actually playing the game so that everyone can more play, like James Carr's infinite game. We'd be playing an infinite game instead of a finite game, right?
Well, you sort of negated my next question, but I wanted to ask it anyway, because
we can talk about it.
Yeah, because it came up with regards to talking about this. In duality, we have the almost neutral labels of masculine, feminine, yin, yang. But what happens when we come to things like? Oh, sorry, there was a bit of sound feedback. What happens when we come to things like good and evil, right and wrong? How do we sit with right and wrong in an evolution and an involution with both of them? How do we come to terms with, if that's for want of a better term, with the acceptance of evil as well as good?
Yeah. Wow, that's a rich question. Let me see if we can tackle it a little bit together. And just keep in mind, this is just one woman's perspective. So if anyone's listening and has a contrary opinion, it's totally welcome. And just take this for whatever usefulness it is, as one perspective in a sea of so many on this topic. Everyone's got a different idea about good and evil and how to relate to it. So we are going into crazy waters here. But here's how I hold those ideas. And this may be a controversial thing to say, but I would say that on the whole level, when we identify as all that is, the all. My feeling about that, without any evidence, just as this is just a spiritual feeling from speakers and teachers through my life, is that we exist inside of what I would call like an unconditional space. Meaning that the whole, the all that is 100% completely unconditional. In some senses, doesn't have a preference for good or evil, is agnostically trying to know itself as creation. And so we are all a piece of all that is, a protuberance of that all that is, through our particular unique lensing, experiencing all the goods, the evils, the rights, the wrongs of life, based on our free will to do so. So the way good and evil to me lives is not at a universal, there is a God on high judging you and torturing you and casting you in or out of this kingdom of heaven based on his or her or its rules. It's given us the biggest gift it could give us, which is the free will and the unconditional space with which to explore who we are, and then for us to personally develop our sense of truth, beauty, and goodness. There was I think his name is Baldwin, developed these three, as we tend to orient as a primary around truth or beauty or goodness, and we each want all three of those, but we tend to have these in a hierarchy. One is more important to us than the other in our lives. And so we are in this unconditional space, and I've even heard it said that if it wasn't unconditional, it would collapse.
Right.
The minute there was a condition that was preferred, any exploration of anything outside of that, we would become homogenous. So it's this gorgeous gift we've been given. And then we ourselves get to explore our relationship to that. And that's really a deep exploration of our own relationship to shame, our own relationship to guilt, our own relationship down the path of, are we on a path of primarily integrating, expanding, and connecting, or on a path of disintegrating, separating, and repelling. And moment by moment, we tend to be exploring both of those and learning a ton from it. So I have my own moral code,
right,
my own set of values. And I have ones that I think are better, quote unquote, or right for society that I wish we all would hold. But I do not hold myself as an authority in direct connection with all that is telling me that I'm right about those.
Right. No, of course not.
So,
and whichever way you go, whether it's expansive, collaborative, and togetherness, or downward into the destructive separation, from that unity perspective, everything is perfect.
Absolutely. There is a present perfection that is all pervasive, that is independent of circumstance.
Right.
This is mother love. We're just folding in love here for just a second, because I love what you just said. I look at these kind of like a braid, like we are woven in this braid of mother love and father love, right? Mother love is present perfection on a universal level, but it is like, you are perfect just as you are. I would change nothing. Like not a hair on your head would I change. You are perfect. That's mother love in its kind of archetypal essence and its purity, right?
Yeah.
as he touches his head, well, wait a minute, where are the rest of my hair?
Yeah.
But
it's the hair on my chest, I think. It's a...
But then father love in this weave of love is the another kind of love, which is I believe in you,
right,
to become more,
right,
to evolve. It is the evolutionary impulse on the universal.
Right.
So there is a present perfection and an evolutionary impulse and a future vision.
Yes.
And when our mother love and our father love, our fathers, like, they believe in us to grow. And I'm not saying every father, your mother may have been like this. It's not a gendered thing.
Yeah, totally. It was
this
my
is
mother.
like an archetype of love. Yeah. And when we have those in balance, the relationship feels good. And when we have them out of balance, they turn into their shadows. So father love turns into criticism. You're such a fuck up. You can't do anything right, right? And mother love turns into like complacency and stagnancy. It's like, oh no, you don't need to do anything. You're fine as you are. Just stay here. Just kind of sit around. You can live at home. Don't go out there and do anything. You're fine. And so we want to exhibit, because every quality, no matter what it is, has a light and shadow.
Right.
You take even truth has a light and a shadow. In its shadow, it's rigid and controlling. And in its light, it is like transcendent and all-seeing, right? Harmony has a shadow. In its shadow, it is collapsed and self-abandoning, losing oneself. And in its beauty, it's like a connection to all beings, to all things, and in service. So everything has its light and shadow. So I just notice those lights and shadows, and then I get to personally navigate through. How do I want to relate to every concept which has that duality in my own life?
Yeah, it's so beautifully put, Jennifer. I mean, it was,
Oh, you're welcome. And I know it might be controversial.
No, to me, not to me. I mean, it's obvious.
Right.
And for those people who, one of my favorite writers on this topic who just writes so poetically and beautiful is Leo Hartong. He wrote. Anyway, Leo Hartong, look up his book. It's like the Eye of the Eye or something. It's beautifully written, non-dual acceptance of the space. And, my experience of this or realizations of this is inside meditation where I sat for 20 years. And about 10 years ago, I went beyond mind into the void where there is the experience. There is the presence of the you that's the accepting, completely unopinionated, timeless, edgeless you, and inside that is all the things that you were describing about allowing for space is alive there and always has been. And it's not like it began and now it's started. It's got a time thing. It's just always is there in the background, it's in the foreground, it's in the ground. And the sky.
I love it. It's the ground of our being. Like this is this awake awareness that is so vast, so boundless. It existed way before you were here, It'll exist way after this
Right.
particular body is
Right.
gone.
Yeah.
And it is this untriggerable, vast, spacious awareness that is awareness aware of itself,
Right.
completely untriggerable and grounded
Right.
in its being. It is the space, the
Yeah.
void
Yeah.
that we exist inside of. That's in a sense holding us because we're inside of
Absolutely.
it. Right? But and we all have access to that well-being that is like abiding well-being.
Absolutely.
When you touch that space, that vast, boundless, timeless space. And so there are no guards at the gate.
No.
There are
We're it.
We are all whole, holy, and complete already,
Right.
and can connect to that in any moment.
Yeah.
Right? And
Now,
so
yeah, but people don't understand that, and then if they do, they're like, okay.
No, there's a lot in the way. There's
Right.
a lot in the way. Go ahead. Yeah.
So if they do, they're like, how do I get there?
Yeah.
And then there's this notion of let it go. Right now, what is the let it go?
Yeah.
Because I definitely have opinions on what that is. What would you say is the let it go? What are we letting go, or are we adding in? Like,
Well, there are two distinct schools of thought in psychology and maybe even in spirituality. So I'm recently like reintegrating. I started out on one side of this fence
yeah,
and have reintegrated the other side. So now it's hard for me to answer from one side. So can I speak to both?
speak to anything you desire.
All right. So one school of thought is that what we're letting go of is these patterns, right? So we have a certain way. So when we are overwhelmed in any way, when we're frightened or scared or angry or overwhelmed, triggered in any way,
Yeah,
from a very young age, from the first moment you're crying, right? We learn to run our energy in particular ways in order to cope with feeling like too much stimulation, too much overwhelm, right? And so we run our energy in these patterns, and there's not an infinite number of these patterns. Depending on the school that you subscribe to, some schools have 5, some schools have 7. But there are ways these are like self-defense mechanisms in order to sort of handle the situation.
yes,
And so what we're letting go of is these patterns, these ways of coping with overwhelm
right,
that are the opposite of being present, right? And being present is this liberated consciousness that has no patterning, no conditioned, habituated way of handling overwhelm,
right.
but has like complete or no arrested attention,
Right.
complete liberated attention. And in that moment has a free choice. It's truly free as a being, all the way liberated, because there is no pattern that is subjugated your free will. You are able moment by moment with liberated attention to act and respond. So what are we letting go of is we go into these paths, like some traditions call these sankharas, depending on if you do like Vipassana, but some people call them patterns. Some people go into your childhood wounding,
Right.
and we'll go into those places where you're unresolved, where you're storing charge, energetic charge in the body,
Right.
and in your psyche. I mean, you're storing this emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically, and that you can go in and discharge that emotion so that you can reclaim that piece of your consciousness that's literally stuck as the little 3-year-old throwing a tantrum, or as the rebellious teenager. And we see all these. We're not our age. I'm in my 40s. You're however old you are. You're not your age. You're all of them. Sometimes you're 3, sometimes you're 27, sometimes you're 16. We're all of those ages.
Yes.
So we can go into our history and sort of recover our consciousness so that we can be fully present in this moment, so we can recover the pieces that we've left in those past moments that are actually accessible by us, because time, we actually have all these parts. We are a confluence of parts, right? So we have that 3-year-old is in me today, and I can access her now. So we can use therapeutic techniques to go into that. So that's one half.
Yes.
Right?
So
there's another half.
So that half was establishing patterns to resist flowing fully with the experience because it's too painful. So we create walls and barriers and like cages, which are habit patterns to contain this rather than allow it out and loose.
Exactly, to allow it to flow freely in whatever direction it wants to flow. Some of these patterns are like up and out. They call this the leaving pattern.
Right.
This is the avoidant, right?
I'm out.
Some patterns are down and in.
Right.
They call this the enduring masochist pattern, where you
big news,
like
big newspaper.
Some patterns are out like this, and they call that the aggressive pattern.
Right.
Which is blaming and shaming. I'm going to throw my energy at you aggressively. Right. Some of these patterns are chaotic, all directions at once into the throttle. Okay. Some are contracted in like this in all directions.
And interesting the work of Dylan Newcomb, who we had on the show.
I know Dylan.
On the 20th of April with Uzazu, how he does the harnessing of the positions, which are all those directions. The out, the in and back and down, and then he's got the 3 dimensions which you can express yourself in either way and harnessing. So that's an interesting technique to explore.
That's a gorgeous, both psychological and somatic practice that is like at the bridge between the two that can release physically. Just try to be depressed if you're if your whole body's open and your head is up, like try it. And just try to be kind of happy and joyful with your like structural language and body like this. So there's a beautiful practice in the soma. Yes. When we do that to release that. So I love Dylan. I know his work.
So that's Uzazu. Okay, so what's
a fun word to say?
It's a fun word, exactly. What's the other way that we go, or the other school of thought? You talked about establishing patterns to resist.
Yes, and going into those points of resistance where and to release the energy. So there's a lot of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and all these different kinds of therapies that teach you all the ways to do that. And then Viktor Frankl came onto the scene. I mean, maybe he was in the 40s. So Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he sort of took the psychology by storm. And he was Jewish and in a concentration camp. So he lived through just the horrors of what it's like to have your sovereignty, to be imprisoned, really. Right. And in his experience of being in a concentration camp, he created, he wrote this book called Man's Search for Meaning, but created this whole side of psychology that said that the point is not to go into our past. Because if you locate yourself at any location, there's an endless well of anger and sadness and grief. There is no discharging that because it is endless. It is all human beings for eons. Right. There's so much to feel there. Right. His idea was that instead you put all of your energy and attention on having a life of purpose. So it's an aspirational. So go to the place where you're already whole, healed, and holy. Connect to that dharma. Where are you in that self-organizing system? What is your role? And just be that, do that. Don't go backwards, go forwards. Right. And so in Man's Search for Meaning, it's literally about having your life have meaning. And his therapy was all about helping you find what is the meaning of your life. And let's have all of your attention be there. None of it back there. Not on your mom or your dad or the boyfriend that left you or whatever, that you don't have enough money back here or you didn't achieve the grades that you wanted in school, but all forward into this future vision.
Upward, forward, positive.
In a positive direction towards the meaning of your life. And because if he was able to do it in a concentration camp, then all the rest of us that are pretending like it's too hard for us to do that ought to take a note from his book. None of us have an excuse, right? I mean, or very few of us have an excuse, right? This is one of the hardest things to live through, I can imagine. I mean, of course there are a few harder ones, and not to belittle anyone listening who's been through something that felt even harder than that. It's not about that. It's just about that it's available to us even in the hardest moments. Yes,
that's the key.
Because everything's not to belittle the pain.
Right, because everything's relative. And, and one's pain is relative to one's experience of life. And I mean, you know, a valley girl in LA breaking a nail could be equally
Right,
as
it's
bad
a big
as.
deal, and she's experiencing pain, and that's
Right.
real for her.
Right.
It's important that that suffering is the same suffering.
Right.
It may we may have a different reason we would suffer at that degree,
That's
but that
interesting.
suffering is the same human suffering that we suffer.
That's interesting.
So
So we should, you know, one of the things that another guest said was the notion about meeting. Oh, it was C. Christian. Did you ever go to Kiti in San Rafael? He's an alchemist. He's wonderful. I interviewed him yesterday or the day before, Monday. Anyway, he talked about because his thing is unabashful, dramatic expression of self, and I said, well, what about when people don't like what you're saying? You've annoyed them and stuff, and he says, well, I honor that in them. Like I almost worship their reaction to me, their anger, their thing, and I think it's applicable here in the same way that what you're saying is to honor the perspective of the person without necessarily agreeing with it. We can honor it. We can recognize it as having validity to their vantage point.
Yes, and I might say that developmentally, this person has developed, and I may be speaking way out of turn. I have no idea this person, but so I'm projecting. So I'll just own that this is a projection. But just because it's a good illustration, that is a kind of a more agentic pole. I'm going to do what I want, when I want, how I want. Right. How it impacts others doesn't matter. I'll honor it, but I'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
Developmentally, I would encourage that person. We'll call it a different person, not even your friend.
Right.
That sounds like
because the other thing he added was that you have to come with kindness.
Communion. Can we be in connection such that what it even occurs to us desire wouldn't create disharmony in others because they are us, we are them. Like I feel that with my partner. I have a beautiful beloved. I'm very lucky in that.
Yes,
I have
you do.
this incredible love in my life, and I feel both empowered to speak my desires exactly as they are, but because we are connected, I can't even drum up having a desire that would hurt him. Right. Because he's part of my body. It would be like, chopping my nose to spite my face. It occurs to me that all the desires I want are a win-win. Yes. Like I talked about at the beginning, not a win-lose. Yes. Because I'm feeling the whole system communally, like our ecosystem, as best I can. No one is perfect. None of us are ideal here. But on a good day, I'm feeling that. And it occurs to me to want things that are good for the whole. Yes. Not anything that would be good for me and bad for them.
And that's easy with your intimate relationships, but obviously less easy with random strangers walking past you on the street.
You can't please everyone. There's just no way. You'll kill yourself. You'll do nothing. You'll be in this tiny little box. Like one of my jams is about empowerment, and what I notice is that people are like, not wanting to be too much of either pole. Like I don't want to be too loud, but I don't want to be too quiet, and I don't want to be too forceful, but I don't want to be too meek, and I don't want to do this. And so it's like pull back, pull back, pull back.
So they're focusing on the things they don't want.
Yeah, and so if your life is an expression of all these 1,000 pullbacks, like you can't be an empowered sovereign being in that sense. Life doesn't need you to be less of anything. Right. It needs you to be more of everything. And in that being more, that more is also connected, agency and communion, sovereignty and unity, to the whole. So that more is still in relationship to it, which is why I teach about love and relating. Yeah. But is also firmly like being more of who they are. So not like probably like your friend. Yeah. He probably is like bringing more of who he is, and is also he's a spiritual teacher connected to the experience of those around him. And that playing that balance to me is what I would endorse us at least developing as a society.
And of course, that circles back to the initial question, which was, how do we sit with the unity? Is it get rid and let go of everything? Or is it fact?
Yes. I haven't finished the question. Yes. Oh, good. Yeah. Good. So one way to sit within unity is to let go of the past patterns. Go into your past, therapeutically or spiritually, psychically, go in and heal the parts of you so that they can discharge fully, so that you can reclaim and be a present being full here now. Most of us are scattered.
And they're discharging the patterns of resistance, right?
Yeah, that's the half. So then the other way to hold it is to actually let go of our past completely and find that abiding place, that ground of our being, that awake awareness that is already whole, healed, and holy. It always was.
Yeah. And it begins now.
And it is here right now, and you are that. So it's letting go into that, or letting go of the past. It's both a letting go, but what are you letting go of into? And I recommend that you feel, now I'm finally answering your question, you feel, where is the resistance in the system? Where are you going unconscious? And if you're getting stuck in your patterns in your past, then the work for you is there.
Right.
If you're failing to connect to something larger than yourself and connecting into that abiding, whole, healed, and holy place in you, then your work is there. And probably for all of us, it's both. But there's one that's going to have more of your attention.
Right.
And usually, I'll say that evolution knocks on love's door first. Evolution. And yet we often don't hear it.
Right.
So evolution will knock on love's door first.
Yeah.
And then and if we fail to listen, then it will bang the door down with our pain, which will grab our attention.
Why am I thinking of the Three Little Pigs now?
Yes. So if we can train ourselves to hear the lighter call, we could have an easier time of it and just go into that whole healed and holy place. But for some of us, we came here and we like the challenge. We are addicted to the entertainment.
There's so much. There's so much to talk about with you, Jennifer. I want to. So with regards to something I wanted to talk about, something you mentioned was the shame and the guilt, and it circled around with the Viktor Frankl's work that you were talking about with regards to letting go of the past and being in the now, and then living from now as if tabula rasa, clean slate, right now. I'm new eyes, which in the spiritual presence of connecting beyond mind and stuff, that is what really you gain from it, is the now. Like, it's now, and everything is new. There's sort of fresh eyes. Now, back to this notion of guilt. I want to talk about this because a lot of people are stuck in the notion of past because they feel guilty that they should have done something better or could have done something better or should have known or blah blah blah. What do you say about the past should haves? Yeah.
It's a complex question, or it's a complex answer. It's an easy question and a complex answer. Let me see how I want to dive into it. Just a second.
I could tell you my view, and then you could respond.
Well, let's do that. And I do have a response. Let me hear yours, and then let's play off that. That would be fun.
So my initial point is this: that everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. Because if something happened that wasn't supposed to happen, then it means that the universe made a mistake, and the universe doesn't make mistakes.
Right. There is a perfection even then.
So you did the best you could with the shit box of tools that you had at the time, and now you might have a new fucking hammer or a new pencil that you didn't have back then because of that situation. You went, God, I better get a pencil. Now you've got a pencil. If only I should have had this back then. But of course you couldn't have this back then because you needed that experience to get you to this new tool. So we did the best we could with the tools we had. And thus guilt is meaningless and irrelevant because it does not exist. Because you couldn't have done any better than you did in that situation.
Yes, I would add an and to that statement. Not an or
no,
or
great.
not a negating what you said and agreeing with what you said, and add another dimension.
Yeah.
So one of the things I love is adding dimensions. So I'll just say one little caveat. I don't think you know a thing until you have a minimum of like 7 definitions. Right?
Okay.
So like 360-degree view of something as big as like guilt, right?
That makes sense.
Truth.
Yeah.
These big ideas, love. And so when I circle around this idea of guilt and or shame, I see the present perfection of the way through is this self-acceptance, self-love. Like, realize that you are the cutting edge of 14 billion years of evolution through you.
Right.
And you are at that edge, and that was your edge, and that's who you are.
Right.
And that was perfect. That is one view.
Yeah.
And there is a function, a societal, communal function of guilt and shame that is useful. And insofar as one positive use of guilt and shame, we're probably not going to transcend feeling it. So how can we create the highest use of it in our lives? And so here's, to me, one answer to that question, which is, if the guilt and shame is a signal in your system of an out of alignmentness, like you are out of alignment with the values of who you truly are, right? Feeling into, like, who are you as that whole, healed, and holy being that has a set of values that's slightly out of alignment. Like, some of your parts are moving in opposite directions, so there's a disalignment. And if our guilt and shame, we don't use it to go into self-loathing, which isn't actually useful or valuable at all. But what is valuable is not just to say, oh yeah, I was perfect, is also to take a look and go, oh, that was a moment where I was out of alignment. What value that is precious to me am I wanting to express that wasn't expressed, that was maybe violated in that moment, right? Maybe in a moment you weren't honest, but you have a value of utter honesty, of radical honesty. And this guilt that you're feeling is like, oh, this isn't out of alignment with who I want to be. So let me come back into alignment. And what is that value?
I love that.
Maybe you have a value on courage. And in that moment you shrunk and got fearful and held back.
Right.
And so if you can use your guilt and shame for the highest purpose I can imagine, it's not to not accept yourself, not to have loathing, but to actually use it for the higher purpose of, oh, this is a moment of disalignment, unalignment. What would be aligning for me? Who would that version of me? What would have me clapping in the theater for myself? And how would I replay that such that I was? So that would be my answer to your guilt.
I love that. And for me, it's like we Frankl it.
Yes.
Frankl it.
Or Maslow it. Maslow is another one.
Right. Yeah.
He was all about self-actualization, right? So Frankl and Maslow are really started, to me, the human potential movement.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I love Maslow, and from early psychology days, always loved it. However, I've started to feel that Maslow's a little bit linear in how it appears. It appears like it's linear,
oversimplified, yeah.
And you know, there are transcendent pathways up the pyramid or around, and you know, it's really a Mobius strip rather than a pyramid. And
I mean, and Frankl taught us that because his survival was at risk every moment, and he was completely in that experience, self-actualized.
Right.
And as was Nelson Mandela when he was put in jail. Like there are examples of people who don't have the love, safety, and belonging of that second layer, have their survival very impoverished ways of living. The ascetics of primarily in India, who gave away all their belongings, didn't know where they were going to even eat.
Sadhu.
Gave away. Yeah, exactly. Siddhartha, Buddha started that path. Anyway, these people have shown us that it doesn't necessarily go linear, although most of us can't even get to the top without having those handled. It takes a rare being that knows how to actually live from their self-actualization independent of circumstance. And that, to me, that breed of human that's able to be in that space, that untriggerable, vast, boundless space, regardless of circumstance, that's liberation.
Right.
When it doesn't require anything, it's not dependent on anything.
Right.
So that to me is something to aspire to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I'm tingling all over. I mean, I want to keep talking, but
Are we at the hour?
Well, we're 50 minutes in. I want to.
9 minutes, I think, right?
I do want to hear about some of the things you're doing now, because this is magical stuff. And I would love to talk about free will, but I think it's a lot longer than a 10-minute conversation.
Maybe we'll do another one.
Absolutely. So tell us about some of the stuff you're doing. How do people get in touch with you? Doing seminars? You see clients?
Yes, I do. I have a couple doorways in, and then once you open the doorway with me, then your whole being is all
you're in
part of the package, part of the play.
Uh-huh.
However, those two doorways tend to look quite different. So on one side, I told you that I'm deeply interested. I'm both like a student of and guide for those wanting to dive into how to lead, serve, and inspire. So this is leadership. I love working with both men and women. I often work with women, but I do both. And often people that have a lot at stake. Entrepreneurs. I work with companies in the Silicon Valley, for instance. Executive teams. People starting businesses, and I help them to develop a more integrated or a quadratic form of leadership that includes these 4 faces of what it means to lead. Which you haven't gotten into, but I have these 4 faces of leadership that I teach from, and we dive deeply into that window. So if you are someone that is mission driven, that has a lot at stake and wants to advance and evolve the way you lead, and integrates not just one way of leading, but like a full range of what it means to lead, then that's one way you could come and work with me and play with me. And that's like one-on-one. I do offsites, I do trainings, workshops, retreats on that end. And then in addition, on the other side, I dive deeply into the realms of love and relationship, right? And here we're diving into the depths of rewriting your relational DNA so that you can actually embody an ideal love story. And for me, it's all about installing evolutionary upgrades. I want to help you be the person, not that can cope with the fights or conflicts you're having, but help you transcend to the point where you don't even have that one to begin with, where we dissolve the very fabric of what's creating the opposition. And we teach this wheel of resolution, these 8 polarities that we can help you transcend in your love life and your relationship. And I work with couples primarily, but also singles who are wanting to evolve. And for them, I do one-on-one coaching, couples coaching, and we've done retreats and workshops. We have an online course we're going to be launching fairly soon, so that given it's COVID times and we're virtual,
right.
There'll be a way to do a course virtually with us as well. So evolvinglove.us is that site, and quadratic. .co is my leadership site. So both of those are ways to find me.
Evolvinglove.co.
Either way you come, we're going to look at both territories, but one may be your primary focus.
And I had another website for you. Was that your name?
Oh, yes, jennifersrussell.com. I haven't updated that site in a long time, but through that you can see a little bit about me. I have several sites. I've got also recodelive.com and emergenceproject.org. It was a think tank to talk about systems thinking. There's a lot of, I'm an entrepreneur, dyed in the wool, so I've got a lot of projects.
Now, dyed in the wool, I saw that. And,
dyed in the wool.
As ignorant as I am, I didn't know that saying, and I haven't yet looked it up.
Meaning like almost from birth, like
dyed in the wool. Okay.
I've been creating enterprises, creating projects, creating businesses, creating entrepreneurial endeavors.
I see. If something's dyed in the wool, you can't get it out. It's already there from the start.
Just keep doing it. You can't help yourself.
And what about like seminars or group things that people can join without coming to a one-to-one? Do you have things like that coming up?
Because of the times we're in, we had those on the calendar and they've been pulled. So right now we're focusing our energy into on our online courses until we can do more live work. But we definitely do one-on-one work. I do tons of online Skype and Zoom calls. where we go deep. I mean, like
Right.
I work energetically, I work psychologically, spiritually. So there's a lot of power we can do in these times. And then as soon as it feels safer, we'll definitely be doing some live workshops. We do a 2-day and a 3-day workshop on love, and then we do a 4-day sort of luxury retreat at this gorgeous place in Tahoe. We bring 33 couples together and
Amazing.
totally rewire everything. So those things will be coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can't predict in these times when it'll be safe to gather.
Of course. And you know, working with your partner Brian, the dynamic is so wonderful between you two. You know, it's something that I do with Z as well. But this notion, it's so beautiful to witness your collaborative confluence. What did you say? What was the word? God, I wrote it down.
We tessellate. Yeah,
tessellate.
Our minds, hearts, and bodies.
Your tessellation.
It was. Yeah, and we love it. We're like a dynamic duo. We love teaching together, and I feel like I got to die into becoming the woman I always dreamed of being in his love story and in ours. And he's extraordinary. He's someone else you might want on the show at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's just a beautiful being.
Absolute beautiful being. And it's just been great. Definitely, I'm holding back. I'm creating
so much, right?
I'm creating patterns to hold back the excitement of different topics because I know that the time frame, and we've got Nate on the line as well. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's been such a pleasure, as I knew it would be.
I knew it'd be juicy. Look how much energy there is. I'm like buzzing.
I always have more energy after a good enchantment than before, and it's like, you know.
Absolutely. Oh, well, thank you so much. And I'll sign off for here, but have a great rest of your show.
Thank you.
But wait, you guys listening, thank you.
Absolutely. But don't go yet. But I want to thank you and like end, because then at some point I'm going to cut this, and so that will be the end of your show, and I'll send you your little video separate.